The cacophony of laughter and chatter filled the halls of Morningside High, where students rushed to their lockers or lingered in clusters before class. Amid the sea of movement, Ethan Gray quietly wheeled his chair down the hallway, his gaze fixed on the worn notebook perched on his lap. He knew better than to look up. Eye contact often invited trouble. To most of his classmates, he was a background figure, unnoticed and unremarkable. But to Jason Carter and his gang, Ethan was an easy target. "Hey, Wheels!" Jason's voice cut through the din, dripping with mockery. Leaning against a set of lockers, arms crossed, Jason wore the smug grin of someone who thrived on belittling others. His friends burst into laughter as he continued, careful not to leave skid marks on the floor. Ethan's hands tightened on the armrests of his wheelchair, his knuckles turning white. The sting of their words was familiar, but no less sharp. Forcing himself to breathe deeply, he rolled past them without responding. He had learned long ago that silence was often the best defense, though it didn't make the humiliation any easier to bear. Behind the facade of his quiet demeanor, Ethan carried a secret that none of his tormentors could have imagined. He wasn't just another student at Morningside High. Ethan was the heir to Gray Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate known for its innovations in technology and real estate. His parents, Henry and Clara Gray, had built the empire from the ground up, but their lives were tragically cut short in a car accident when Ethan was 12 years old. The accident left Ethan with more than grief, it left him with a spinal injury that confined him to a wheelchair. Raised by his grandmother, Margaret Gray, Ethan grew up surrounded by wealth and privilege, but also by a strong moral compass. Margaret was a pillar of strength and wisdom, always reminding Ethan, "Your worth isn't measured by your wealth, but by your actions. Remember that, no matter what." It was Margaret who supported Ethan's decision to attend a public high school rather than the exclusive academies available to someone of his status. Ethan wanted to experience life outside the gilded bubble of his upbringing, but the transition wasn't easy. His wheelchair and thrift store clothes, a deliberate choice to maintain a low profile, made him stand out in all the wrong ways. At Morningside, he was just the poor cripple, an identity he let others believe to avoid drawing attention to his real life. After Jason's latest round of taunts, Ethan made his way to the art room, a sanctuary that offered solace from the chaos of the school. The scent of paint and pencil shavings greeted him as he wheeled into the familiar space. Here, surrounded by blank canvases and shelves of supplies, Ethan could escape the weight of reality. At the center of the room was his latest project, a vibrant landscape inspired by the coastal estate where he had spent summers as a child. The sprawling property, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, had been his family's retreat, a place filled with laughter and warmth before tragedy struck. Now, it existed only in his memories and on the canvas. As Ethan dipped his brush into a palette of blues and greens, the sound of footsteps drew his attention. Lila Matthews, his closest and only real friend at Morningside, entered the room carrying her sketchbook. Lila was an artist like Ethan, and her fiery red hair and sharp wit made her a force to be reckoned with. She was also fiercely loyal, never hesitating to defend Ethan when he needed it. "Another masterpiece in the making?" she asked, setting her sketchbook on the table. Ethan offered a faint smile. "Just trying to escape reality for a while." Lila frowned, sensing the tension in his voice. "Jason again?" Ethan shrugged, not wanting to dwell on it. "It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" Lila's eyes flashed with anger. "Ethan, they're jerks, and they think they can get away with it because no one stands up to them." He appreciated her frustration on his behalf, but he had learned that confronting bullies often led to more trouble. "It doesn't matter," he said quietly. "They don't know me, and they never will." Lila sat beside him, her expression softening. "You shouldn't have to put up with this, Ethan. You deserve better." He knew she was right, but he also knew the importance of keeping his real identity a secret. If the school learned he was a billionaire heir, it would only bring a different kind of scrutiny, one he wasn't ready to face. As the bell signaled the start of the next class, Ethan packed up his supplies and headed to his next destination. The day dragged on, each class blending into the next as he avoided eye contact and kept to himself. By the time the final bell rang, he was exhausted, not from the lessons, but from the effort of staying invisible. Back home, Ethan found comfort in the quiet elegance of the Gray estate. The sprawling mansion, surrounded by manicured gardens, was both a haven and a reminder of the life he had lost. His grandmother greeted him in the foyer, her sharp eyes softening as she noticed the weariness in his expression. "Tough day?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Ethan nodded. "Same as always." Margaret sighed, her voice filled with both understanding and resolve. "Ethan, you have the strength to rise above this. They may see you as weak, but you are anything but." Her words stayed with him as he retreated to his room, where the walls were adorned with his artwork and shelves lined with books. He stared at a photo of his parents on his desk, their smiles frozen in time. "I'll prove them wrong," he whispered to himself. "They'll see who I really am, when the time is right." Unbeknownst to Ethan, that time was approaching faster than he realized. An unexpected event was about to turn his world upside down and force the Bullies to confront a truth they could never have imagined. It started as an ordinary day at Morningside High, but for Ethan Gray, it was about to mark a significant shift in his life. He had become skilled at blending into the background, navigating the halls with quiet determination. However, Jason Carter and his gang had different plans. They thrived on cruelty, and for them, Ethan was an irresistible target. That morning, as Ethan wheeled into the cafeteria during breakfast break, he immediately noticed Jason and his crew loitering near the entrance. He considered turning around and skipping breakfast altogether, but his stomach growled in protest. Reluctantly, he pressed forward, hoping to make it past them unnoticed. "Hey, Wheels!" Jason called out, his voice cutting through the cafeteria noise. "You lost?" The pity parades down the hall. Ethan's face burned, but he kept his eyes on the floor, refusing to give them the reaction they craved. He maneuvered his wheelchair toward the food line, but Jason and two of his friends blocked his path, smirking. "Where's the fire, buddy?" Jason sneered, leaning over Ethan's chair. "Oh wait, I forgot, you're not exactly going anywhere fast." Ethan clenched his fists, his anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Leave me alone, Jason," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the humiliation. Jason chuckled, stepping back with exaggerated mockery. "Ah, look at him, standing up for himself." "Oh, wait." Laughter erupted from his friends as Jason shoved a tray of food from a nearby table, scattering its contents across Ethan's lap. Gasps echoed from nearby students, but no one intervened. The cafeteria fell silent, the tension thick in the air. Ethan's breathing quickened as the shame and anger surged within him. He wanted to lash out, to scream, but he reminded himself of his grandmother's words, "You are not defined by how others treat you, but by how you respond." Before Ethan could react, Lila Matthews burst through the crowd, her fiery red hair a blur of motion. "What the hell is wrong with you, Jason?" she snapped, stepping between him and Ethan. "Do you get some kind of sick thrill out of this?" Jason rolled his eyes. "Relax, Matthews. We're just having some fun." "This isn't fun, it's pathetic," Lila shot back, her voice ringing with authority. She grabbed a handful of napkins and knelt beside Ethan, helping him clean up the mess. "You don't have to put up with this, Ethan," she said softly, her eyes filled with concern. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight as he tried to hold back tears. The cafeteria began to buzz with murmurs, students exchanging glances and whispers. Jason, clearly embarrassed by the attention, crossed his arms and muttered, "Whatever. Let's go." He and his friends stalked off, their laughter fading into the distance. After the incident, Ethan retreated to the art room, seeking solace in his work. He was tired of the constant bullying, the whispers, and the feeling of being powerless. As he stared at the canvas before him, his mind raced with thoughts of retaliation. But deep down, he knew that stooping to Jason's level wouldn't solve anything. That evening, Ethan confided in his grandmother, Margaret Gray, as they sat in the grand library of their estate. The room was filled with the scent of old books and polished wood, a comforting contrast to the chaos of his day. Jason dumped food on me in front of everyone, Ethan said, his voice heavy with frustration. And all I could do was sit there. Margaret's eyes softened as she reached for his hand. Ethan, people like Jason prey on others because of their own insecurities. But you are stronger than they'll ever be. You have nothing to prove to them. But it feels like I do, Ethan admitted. They think I'm weak, poor, worthless. Margaret studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps it's time to show them the truth, not out of anger or spite, but to remind them that appearances can be deceiving. The next day, as Ethan sat in his usual corner of the art room during lunch, he received an unexpected call on his cell phone. It was from Thomas Reed, the CEO of Gray Enterprises and his family's trusted advisor. Thomas had been a guiding figure in Ethan's life, helping him navigate the responsibilities that came with his inheritance. Ethan, Thomas said, his tone warm yet businesslike, I wanted to inform you that the annual shareholder meeting is next week. As the majority shareholder, your presence would be greatly appreciated. Ethan hesitated. He had attended such meetings before, but they were usually formalities, with Thomas handling most of the details. This time, however, he felt a pull to do more, to step into his role with purpose. I'll be there, he said firmly. As he hung up, an idea began to take shape in Ethan's mind. He realized that Jason and his friends didn't deserve his anger, they deserved the truth. They needed to see the person they had been mocking, not as a victim, but as someone far beyond their shallow judgments. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a surge of determination. The bullies had made their assumptions, but they didn't know who he truly was. And soon, they would learn. The annual Gray Enterprises shareholder meeting was a grand affair, held in the luxurious ballroom of the family-owned Gray Tower, a gleaming skyscraper that symbolized the legacy Ethan's parents had built. Business leaders, investors, and media representatives gathered to hear updates on the company's success, and this year, Ethan was determined to make an impression. On the morning of the event, Ethan arrived at the tower with his grandmother, Margaret Gray, by his side. He wore a sleek tailored suit that accentuated his presence, and his wheelchair gleamed with polished metal and leather accents. Gone was the quiet, unassuming boy from Morningside High. Today, Ethan embraced his role as the majority shareholder and heir to one of the most influential companies in the country. The ballroom buzzed with anticipation as Ethan rolled to the front of the room, where a stage and podium awaited him. Thomas Reed, the CEO, greeted him warmly and gestured toward the microphone. Ready to address your audience? Thomas asked, his tone supportive. Ethan nodded, his confidence growing as he looked out at the sea of faces. I'm ready. The meeting proceeded with updates from department heads and financial reports, but the highlight of the day came when Ethan took the stage. As he positioned himself behind the podium, the room fell silent, every eye fixed on him. Good afternoon, Ethan began, his voice steady and clear. My name is Ethan Gray, and as the majority shareholder of Gray Enterprises, I want to thank you all for your dedication to the success of this company. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the audience. Today, I want to share something more personal. Many of you know me only as a name, a young man stepping into the legacy my parents left behind. But what you may not know is that I've spent the last few years trying to live as far from this legacy as possible. Ethan's eyes scanned the room, his voice growing more resolute. I wanted to understand life beyond wealth and privilege, to experience the struggles and triumphs that define so many people's lives. But in doing so, I faced challenges of my own, judgment, assumptions, and even ridicule. He paused again, this time to steady his emotions. There were times when I felt small, unseen, and powerless. But I learned something valuable: our worth isn't determined by the labels others place on us. It's determined by how we rise above those labels and live with integrity. The audience erupted into applause, and Ethan's grandmother beamed with pride. Ethan's speech was more than a declaration, it was a turning point in how he saw himself and his role in the world. Meanwhile, back at Morningside High, the school buzzed with rumors. Jason Carter and his gang, who had always dismissed Ethan as the poor cripple, stumbled upon a viral social media post showing Ethan's speech at the shareholder meeting. The video, shared by a local news outlet, highlighted his poised demeanor and powerful message. Jason stared at his phone, disbelief written all over his face. "No way," he muttered. "That can't be the same Ethan." But as he watched the video, there was no mistaking it. The boy he had bullied for years was now commanding the attention of some of the most powerful figures in the business world. Jason's friends exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado deflated. By lunchtime, the entire school had seen the video. Whispers filled the hallways as students pulled out their phones, rewatching the clip and sharing it with friends. Ethan, who had always been a shadowy figure in the background, was now the talk of Morningside High. When Ethan returned to school the next day, the atmosphere was noticeably different. As he rolled through the hallways, students who had ignored him for years now greeted him with wide eyes and hesitant smiles. Some offered compliments, while others whispered in awe as he passed. Jason, however, avoided eye contact, his usual smirk replaced by a look of uncertainty. When Ethan wheeled into the cafeteria, Jason's group scattered, leaving him alone at their usual table. Ethan could feel the shift in power dynamics, but he didn't let it go to his head. Instead, he maintained his quiet dignity, knowing that his actions spoke louder than any words. During lunch, Lila joined Ethan at his table, grinning as she slid her tray beside his. "So, Mr. Majority Shareholder," she teased, her tone light. "How does it feel to shake up the entire school?" Ethan chuckled, grateful for her unwavering support. "It's strange," he admitted. "But honestly, I didn't do it for them. I did it for me." Lila nodded, her expression softening. "And that's why it matters. You didn't change who you are, you just showed them the truth." As the day went on, Ethan noticed more and more students approaching him with questions, compliments, and even apologies. Among them was a nervous-looking Jason, who found Ethan near the art room after school. "Hey, Ethan," Jason began, shuffling awkwardly. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." Ethan studied Jason for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a calm voice, he replied, "I appreciate that, Jason. But remember, words are easy. Actions matter more." Jason nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll prove it," he said before walking away. For Ethan, the revelation of his true identity wasn't about revenge or vindication, it was about reclaiming his power and showing the world that he was more than their assumptions. As he rolled into the art room to work on his latest painting, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He was no longer hiding, and the world would have to see him for who he truly was. The days following Ethan's revelation were a whirlwind of shifting dynamics at Morningside High. For years, Ethan Gray had been overlooked, ridiculed, and underestimated. Now, the same students who had ignored or mocked him seemed eager to earn his attention, their attitudes transformed by the realization of who he truly was. It was both satisfying and surreal. Walking, or rather, rolling, through the hallways felt different. The whispers and smirks that once followed him were replaced by awkward smiles and hesitant waves. Students who had barely acknowledged his existence now went out of their way to greet him. While some of their motives were clearly superficial, Ethan noticed a genuine shift in a few of his classmates. It wasn't just about his wealth, it was about the respect he had earned by standing tall in the face of adversity. Jason Carter, however, found himself at the opposite end of the social spectrum. Known for his bravado and cruel humor, Jason now faced judgment from his peers for how he had treated Ethan. Students who once laughed at his jokes now avoided him, their whispers of disapproval trailing in his wake. His usual table in the cafeteria was half empty, and the confidence that had once defined him seemed to waver. For Ethan, the change in Jason's behavior was particularly striking. Jason no longer made snide comments or tried to humiliate him. Instead, he seemed to shrink whenever Ethan was nearby, his usual swagger replaced by an air of unease. Lila noticed it too. "Looks like someone's finally getting a taste of humility," she remarked one afternoon as they worked on their art projects. Ethan sighed, setting down his paintbrush. "Maybe. But I'm not sure it's enough." "What do you mean?" Lila asked, glancing at him curiously. Ethan hesitated, his thoughts swirling. It's easy to say you're sorry when you're cornered. What matters is whether you actually change. Jason wasn't the only one grappling with guilt. Several of Ethan's classmates approached him over the next few days, offering apologies for their past behavior. One girl, Mia, confessed, "I never said anything when Jason was picking on you. I guess I thought it wasn't my business, but now I realize that staying silent makes me just as bad." Ethan appreciated her honesty, even if it couldn't erase the past. "It's not too late to do better," he told her. "For me, for others, and for yourself." His words seemed to resonate with Mia and others like her, sparking conversations about the culture of bullying that had gone unchecked at Morningside High. For the first time, students began to reflect on their behavior and the ways they had contributed to or ignored the mistreatment of others. Ethan's influence extended beyond the social realm. Inspired by his resilience and leadership, the school administration invited him to speak at an assembly about overcoming challenges and the importance of empathy. Standing on the stage in the packed auditorium, Ethan felt a mix of nerves and determination. He had never been comfortable being the center of attention, but he knew this was an opportunity to make a difference. "Most of you know me as the guy in the wheelchair," Ethan began, his voice steady. "Some of you might have seen me as someone weak, someone easy to dismiss or ridicule. And for a long time, I let myself believe that too." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But I've learned that strength isn't about how you look or what you can do physically. It's about how you handle the challenges life throws at you. It's about standing tall, figuratively, in my case, when others try to tear you down." The room was silent, every student hanging on his words. "What I hope you take away from my story isn't just that I happen to be a billionaire or that I overcame bullying. I want you to understand that the way we treat each other matters. Kindness matters. Standing up for what's right matters." When he finished, the room erupted into applause, and Ethan felt a wave of pride and relief. For the first time, he had used his voice not just to defend himself but to inspire change. Jason sat in the back of the auditorium, his head bowed as Ethan spoke. Hearing Ethan's story in such raw detail made him feel the weight of his actions more deeply than ever before. After the assembly, Jason lingered in the hallway, waiting for the crowd to disperse. When Ethan rolled past, Jason stepped forward hesitantly. "Ethan," he said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Ethan stopped and looked up, his expression calm but guarded. "What is it, Jason?" Jason swallowed hard, his usual bravado gone. "I know I've been a jerk, worse than a jerk. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Really sorry." Ethan studied him for a moment, searching for sincerity. "I've heard you say that before," he said evenly. "What makes this time different?" Jason hesitated, then said, "Because I'm ready to change. I don't want to be that guy anymore." Ethan considered his words, then nodded. "I hope you mean that, Jason. Because the only way to prove it is through your actions." Jason nodded, his face a mixture of regret and resolve. "You'll see. I'll do better." As the weeks went on, Jason began to follow through on his promise. He joined the school's new anti-bullying campaign, working alongside Ethan and Lila to create a safer, more inclusive environment. His efforts didn't go unnoticed, and while not everyone forgave him immediately, his determination to make amends earned him a second chance. For Ethan, seeing Jason's transformation was a reminder of the power of change. He had once been the target of Jason's cruelty, but now they were working together to create something positive. It wasn't an easy process, but it was a step in the right direction. The transformation at Morningside High continued to unfold as Ethan Gray's story became a catalyst for change. The school that once turned a blind eye to bullying was now fostering a culture of accountability and compassion. Ethan's courage and leadership inspired students and staff alike to take an active role in creating a more supportive environment. Ethan worked closely with the administration to establish an anti-bullying initiative called the Bridge Project. The program aimed to bridge the gaps between students of different backgrounds, abilities, and social groups, fostering understanding and empathy. With the support of his grandmother, Margaret Gray, Ethan secured funding to expand the program, providing resources for peer mediation, counseling, and community-building activities. Jason Carter's involvement in the project was initially met with skepticism. Many students questioned his motives, unsure if his participation was genuine or simply an attempt to repair his tarnished reputation. But Jason was determined to prove that he had changed. He attended every meeting, volunteered for every event, and consistently showed up with humility and a willingness to learn. One of the first major events of the Bridge Project was a Unity Day, where students participated in workshops, team-building exercises, and open discussions about their experiences with bullying and exclusion. Ethan, Lila, and Jason worked together to organize the event, each contributing their unique strengths. Ethan opened the day with a heartfelt speech, sharing his journey and the lessons he had learned. "None of us are perfect," he said, addressing the crowd of students and teachers. "But every day, we have the chance to be better, to choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment. That's what today is about." The workshops were designed to encourage empathy and connection. In one session, students shared personal stories about times they had felt isolated or misunderstood. Jason sat quietly at first, listening as his peers opened up about their struggles. Finally, he spoke. "I used to be one of the people who made others feel small," Jason admitted, his voice filled with regret. "I thought it made me stronger, but all it did was hurt people and myself. I'm not proud of who I was, but I'm trying to do better now. I hope I can make up for some of the damage I caused." The room fell silent as Jason finished, his vulnerability leaving an impact on everyone present. For the first time, his classmates saw him not as the arrogant bully he once was, but as someone who was genuinely trying to change. Lila leaned over to Ethan and whispered, "I think he might actually mean it." The success of Unity Day marked a turning point for Jason and for the school. The students who had doubted his sincerity began to see him in a new light, and Jason, in turn, found a sense of purpose in helping others. He formed an unlikely friendship with Ethan, and the two began working together on more projects for the Bridge Project. One afternoon, as they painted a mural in the school courtyard, an abstract representation of unity and diversity, Jason turned to Ethan. "I owe you an apology," he said, his tone serious. Ethan looked at him, confused. "You've already apologized, Jason." "More than once." "I know," Jason replied. "But this time, I want to apologize for something specific. For all the times I made you feel like you were less than me, like you didn't matter. I see now how wrong I was, and I'm sorry." Ethan paused, his brush hovering over the wall. "Thank you," he said finally. "That means a lot." The mural became a symbol of the school's transformation, a vibrant display of what could be achieved when people came together to create something meaningful. Students from every corner of Morningside High contributed to its creation, leaving their mark on a piece of art that celebrated growth, resilience, and community. As the Bridge Project gained momentum, Ethan found himself stepping further into a leadership role. He spoke at local schools, sharing his story and encouraging students to embrace kindness and empathy. His grandmother, proud of his efforts, often attended these events, her presence a source of strength for Ethan. One evening, after a particularly moving presentation, Margaret said, "Your parents would be so proud of you, Ethan. You've turned your pain into purpose, and that's something truly remarkable." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "I just want to make a difference," he said. "To show people that it's never too late to change." Jason's journey continued alongside Ethan's. While he was far from perfect, he remained committed to his transformation. He began standing up for students who were being bullied, using his voice to support others instead of tearing them down. Over time, his efforts earned him the respect of his peers, though he understood that trust had to be built gradually. Lila, ever perceptive, noticed the change in Jason. "You're not the same guy who used to rule this school," she said one afternoon as they worked on another Bridge Project event. Jason chuckled. "Yeah, well, that guy wasn't worth much. I'm trying to be someone better." For Ethan, seeing the changes at Morningside High was deeply fulfilling. The school that once felt like a battleground now felt like a community. Students who had once been divided by cliques and stereotypes were finding common ground, and Ethan knew that the Bridge Project was just the beginning. This wasn't just about fixing the past, it was about building a future where no one felt invisible, where everyone had a voice. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt at peace with the life he was creating. As the Bridge Project continued to flourish, the changes at Morningside High became more visible with each passing day. Students from different social groups were mingling in ways that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Cliques that had once been rigid and exclusionary began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of unity that was tangible in the hallways, classrooms, and even the cafeteria. Ethan Gray watched these transformations with a quiet sense of pride. For so long, he had felt powerless in the face of cruelty and indifference. But now, he saw the impact of his actions rippling outward, touching lives in ways he hadn't dared to imagine. The boy who once tried to blend into the background was now a leader, inspiring others to embrace kindness and understanding. The project's momentum attracted attention beyond the school. Local news outlets covered the story, highlighting how a student-led initiative had changed the culture of an entire high school. Ethan was invited to speak at community events and education conferences, where his message resonated with audiences of all ages. At one such event, held in a packed auditorium, Ethan shared his story with hundreds of attendees. "Strength isn't about how you look or how much power you have," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It's about how you treat others, especially when it's hard. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's not the easy thing to do." The audience erupted into applause, and Ethan felt a wave of gratitude. These moments weren't just about recognition, they were about making a difference, one story at a time. Back at Morningside High, Jason Carter was making good on his promise to change. His involvement in the Bridge Project had become more than a way to repair his reputation, it had become a mission. Jason worked tirelessly to ensure that no student felt the way he had made Ethan feel. He went out of his way to check on younger students, offering encouragement and support. He even approached students he had bullied in the past, apologizing and asking how he could make amends. One of those students was Mia, the girl who had once stayed silent in the face of Jason's cruelty. "I didn't think you were serious about changing," Mia admitted one afternoon as they worked on a Bridge Project event. "But you've proven me wrong." Jason smiled, his gratitude evident. "Thanks, Mia. I'm just trying to do the right thing now. Better late than never, right?" For Ethan, Jason's transformation was a powerful reminder of the potential for growth and redemption. While he had initially been skeptical of Jason's intentions, he now saw a genuine commitment to making things right. Their unlikely partnership evolved into a tentative friendship, built on mutual respect and a shared goal of creating a better environment for everyone at the school. The school administration fully embraced the Bridge Project, dedicating resources to ensure its longevity. They partnered with local organizations to provide workshops on empathy, conflict resolution, and leadership. Ethan became a central figure in these efforts, working closely with teachers and administrators to design programs that would leave a lasting impact. One such initiative was the Peer Support Network, a group of trained student volunteers who provided a safe space for their classmates to share their struggles and seek guidance. Ethan and Lila spearheaded the effort, training the first group of volunteers and creating a schedule that ensured the network was accessible to everyone. Lila, ever the voice of reason, encouraged Ethan to celebrate his successes. "You've done so much, Ethan," she said one afternoon as they reviewed plans for an upcoming event. "Don't forget to take a moment to appreciate how far you've come." Ethan smiled, her words warming his heart. "I couldn't have done it without you, Lila. You've been with me through all of it." Lila grinned. "And I wouldn't trade it for anything." The true strength of the Bridge Project was tested during a difficult moment. A heated argument between two students threatened to undo weeks of progress, as accusations and insults spiraled out of control in the cafeteria. But before the situation could escalate further, members of the Peer Support Network intervened, guiding the students into a private space to mediate the conflict. Ethan and Jason joined the mediation session, offering calm and steady voices that helped de-escalate the tension. By the end of the meeting, the students had reached an understanding, and the incident became an opportunity for growth rather than division. Word of the successful intervention spread quickly, reinforcing the value of the project. Students began to see the Bridge Project not just as an initiative, but as a movement, a way of life that encouraged compassion, accountability, and unity. One evening, as Ethan sat in his art room at home, he reflected on everything that had happened since he first arrived at Morningside High. His journey had been marked by pain and struggle, but it had also been filled with moments of triumph and connection. Looking at a canvas he had just completed, a vibrant depiction of a bridge spanning two distant shores, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. The painting captured everything the Bridge Project stood for, bringing people together, building understanding, and creating a path forward, even when it seemed impossible. When he shared the painting with his grandmother, Margaret Gray, she smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is more than art, Ethan," she said softly. "It's your legacy." Ethan nodded, his heart full. He had always been told that his family's wealth was his inheritance, but he now understood that his true legacy was the impact he had on the world around him. As Ethan Gray's final year at Morningside High came to a close, the impact of the Bridge Project was undeniable. The initiative had transformed the school from a place of division and bullying into a community rooted in empathy and mutual respect. What began as a personal journey for Ethan had blossomed into a movement that touched countless lives, leaving an indelible mark on everyone involved. The final weeks of the school year were filled with celebrations and reflection. The administration held a special assembly to honor the Bridge Project and its founders. Ethan, Lila, and Jason were invited to the stage, where they received standing ovations from their peers and teachers. During the assembly, Ethan gave a heartfelt speech, his voice steady and confident. "This school wasn't always a safe place for everyone," he began. "But through the Bridge Project, we've proven that change is possible when we come together. None of this would have been possible without the courage of those who chose to step up and make a difference." He paused, scanning the audience. "We all have the power to create change, whether it's by standing up for someone, admitting when we're wrong, or simply choosing kindness over judgment. My hope is that this project will continue to grow, long after we're gone, because the work we've started is bigger than any one of us." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the auditorium. Ethan looked out at the sea of faces, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than a moment of recognition, it was a celebration of the collective effort that had made their school a better place. One of the most meaningful moments of the day came when Jason stepped forward to speak. The former bully, who had once thrived on cruelty, now stood as a symbol of redemption and growth. "A year ago, I was part of the problem," Jason admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "I hurt people because it made me feel powerful. But it wasn't real power, it was weakness. Thanks to the Bridge Project and people like Ethan and Lila, I've learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." Jason's vulnerability resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom had witnessed his transformation firsthand. When he finished speaking, the applause was just as loud as it had been for Ethan, a testament to the school's capacity for forgiveness and growth. As graduation approached, Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought back to the boy he had been when he first arrived at Morningside High, quiet, invisible, and burdened by the weight of his struggles. That boy could never have imagined standing on a stage, leading a movement, or inspiring others to see beyond their assumptions. Ethan's grandmother, Margaret Gray, had always been his greatest source of strength and wisdom. On the evening of his graduation, she surprised him with a gift, a journal filled with notes and memories from her time overseeing Gray Enterprises. "You've created a legacy of your own, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with pride. "This is just the beginning. Whatever path you choose, remember that you have the power to change lives, just like you've changed mine." Ethan hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by her words. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he felt ready to face whatever came next. The graduation ceremony was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter, tears, and promises to stay in touch. As Ethan wheeled across the stage to accept his diploma, the applause was deafening. He looked out into the crowd and saw Lila and Jason cheering, their smiles wide with pride. For Ethan, the moment wasn't just about academic achievement, it was a celebration of everything he had overcome and accomplished. After the ceremony, the three of them gathered in the courtyard, where the mural they had painted together stood as a lasting symbol of their journey. "We did it," Lila said, her voice filled with emotion. "Not just the project, but everything. We really made a difference." Jason nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And it's not over. This is just the start." Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of hope and determination. "You're right," he said. "This is just the beginning." The legacy of the Bridge Project continued long after Ethan and his friends graduated. The program expanded to other schools in the district, becoming a model for fostering empathy and inclusion. Ethan remained involved, using his platform as the heir to Gray Enterprises to support initiatives that aligned with his values. His artwork, often inspired by his journey, gained recognition for its emotional depth and ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Lila pursued a career in education, driven by her passion for helping others find their voices. Jason, once a symbol of division, became a youth mentor, sharing his story with students and showing them that change was always possible. Years later, Ethan returned to Morningside High to speak at another assembly. Walking into the familiar auditorium, now adorned with artwork created by current students, he felt a wave of nostalgia and pride. The school had become a vibrant, welcoming community, shaped by the seeds he and his friends had planted. As he stood on the stage, addressing a new generation of students, Ethan's message was clear: we all have the power to make a difference. It starts with one choice, one act of kindness, one moment of courage. And from there, it grows into something bigger than we ever imagined. The applause was deafening, but Ethan's heart was quiet and full. He knew that the legacy of the Bridge Project wasn't just about him, it was about the countless lives it had touched and would continue to touch for years to come.